Jungkook was very quiet on stage, until Jimin said one name that made him cry broken microphone loudly. The microphone squealed softly as Jimin leaned closer and said the name, and Jungkook's breath broke in half like glass. The arena was a living thing, breathing in waves of light and sound, but Jungkook heard none of it. He stood at center stage, shoulders drawn inward, eyes fixed on a point beyond the crowd as if the world had narrowed to a single trembling thread. The song had ended minutes ago. The cheers should have come. Instead, there was a strange, heavy quiet that pressed against his chest. His fingers tightened around the mic, knuckles paling, a habit he had when the memories began to stir. "Are you okay?" Jimin's voice came again, gentle but steady, the way it always did when Jungkook was on the edge of disappearing into himself. Jungkook nodded too quickly. He smiled the practiced smile that fooled cameras and strangers, but not the man standing a step away from him. Sweat cooled on his neck. The stage lights smelled faintly of metal and heat. Somewhere in the distance, a fan screamed his name, and the sound cut through him like a reminder of everything he was supposed to be. He had promised himself tonight would be different. Quiet, controlled, safe. Jimin inhaled, his chest rising, and then he said it, softly, almost accidentally, as if the word had slipped out of his heart before his mind could stop it. Hyun. The name hit Jungkook with the force of a remembered fall. His vision blurred instantly. The stage tilted. He tasted salt before he realized tears were spilling, hot and unstoppable, tracking down his cheeks. A sharp gasp escaped him, raw and unfiltered, and the crowd erupted in confused murmurs as cameras zoomed in, catching the fracture in real time. Jimin froze. For a heartbeat, regret flashed across his face, followed by something deeper, resolve. He stepped closer, blocking Jungkook from the harshest lights, his body a quiet shield. "I'm sorry," he whispered, lips barely moving. "I thought you deserved to hear it out loud." Jungkook shook his head, choking on a sob he had buried for years. Hyun was the name he never spoke. The name of the friend who had believed in him before the stages, before the charts, before the nights that smelled of sweat and fear in cramped practice rooms. The one who had stayed late, who had shared cold convenience store ramen and impossible dreams. The one who had left without goodbye, taking a piece of Jungkook's courage with him. The crowd faded completely now. There was only the thud of Jungkook's heart, the soft hum of the lights, and Jimin's presence, warm, solid, unbearably close. Jimin knew about Hyun, not the whole story, but enough. He knew Jungkook's silence was never empty. It was full of names and promises and guilt. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Jimin said, voice cracking. I saw you drifting, and I remembered what you told me that night you couldn't sleep." Jungkook laughed weakly through tears, a broken sound. He remembered. The dorm was dark. Rain tapped the window like a confession. He had told Jimin about the letter he never sent, about the voicemail he never listened to, about the fear that if he said Hyun's name aloud, the grief would finally finish what it started. "I thought I was over it," Jungkook whispered. His voice carried, amplified, trembling across the arena. He didn't care anymore. "I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, it would stop hurting." Jimin reached out without thinking, resting his forehead briefly against Jungkook's temple, a gesture so intimate it felt like a secret shared with thousands of witnesses. Being quiet isn't the same as being healed. Jungkook's knees felt weak. He let the truth spill, words tumbling out between shaky breaths. "He believed in me before I believed in myself. When he left, I told myself I had to be strong. That crying meant I was ungrateful. That missing him meant I was weak." Jimin pulled back just enough to look at him, eyes shining. Missing someone means they mattered. The crowd had gone silent now, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Even the lights seemed to dim. Jungkook wiped his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed and relieved all at once. He realized how heavy the years had been, how much effort it took to carry a silence shaped like a person. "I've been so afraid," Jungkook admitted. "Afraid that if I let myself feel it, I'd fall apart on stage. Afraid you'd see me like this." Jimin smiled sadly. "I see you every day." Jungkook let out a long, shaking breath. For the first time, he didn't try to stop the tears. They came quietly now, softer, like rain easing after a storm. He straightened his back, feeling something loosen in his chest. The stage no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a place where the truth could stand without armor. Hyun, Jungkook said into the mic, saying the name himself at last. The sound didn't break him. It steadied him. Thank you for believing in me. The words echoed, and something in the air shifted. The crowd erupted, not in screams, but in a warm, swelling applause that wrapped around him like forgiveness. Jimin squeezed his hand once, grounding him, and Jungkook squeezed back, a silent promise that he would no longer carry his ghosts alone. When the music started again, Jungkook sang with a voice stripped of pretense. It wasn't perfect. It was honest. Each note carried the weight of memory and the relief of release. He felt the stage beneath his feet, solid and real, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't quiet because he was afraid. He was quiet because he was listening, to himself, to the past finally at peace, and to the present moment where love, spoken aloud, had the power to make him cry and still let him stand. The lights dimmed after the applause, but the tension did not leave the room with them. Backstage smelled like warm cables, sweat, and faint citrus from the disinfectant the staff used between shows. Jungkook walked ahead without speaking, shoulders tight, jaw locked as if he were afraid one wrong movement would make everything collapse again. Jimin followed, steps quick, heart louder than the crowd had been minutes ago. Jungkook, Jimin called softly. No response. The door to the dressing room shut with a dull thud, cutting off the outside world. Jungkook finally turned, eyes still red, expression sharp with something dangerously close to anger. Why did you say his name? He asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it vibrated with restrained emotion. You promised you wouldn't. Jimin swallowed. I promised I wouldn't force you to talk about it. I didn't promise I'd let you disappear. That was my stage, Jungkook snapped. My moment to survive, not to bleed. Jimin stepped closer anyway. And you think you weren't already bleeding? Silence crashed between them, thick and suffocating. Jungkook laughed bitterly, running a hand through his damp hair. You don't understand what you pulled open. Then make me understand, Jimin said, voice rising. Because watching you slowly destroy yourself in silence is worse than any scandal. Jungkook's eyes flashed. Scandal, he repeated. You think that's all this is? A headline, a clip taken out of context. I think you're scared, Jimin shot back, just as heated. And I think you hide it behind professionalism because you're terrified that if people see the real you, they'll leave. The words landed too close to the truth. Jungkook turned away, breathing hard, palms pressed to the table. His reflection stared back at him from the mirror, famous, loved, exhausted. Hyun left, he said quietly. No explanation. One day he was there, the next day he was gone. Everyone told me to move on, to be grateful, to work harder. So I did. I learned that staying quiet kept people comfortable. Jimin's voice softened but didn't lose its intensity. And who kept you comfortable? Jungkook closed his eyes. No one. Jimin exhaled shakily and stepped into Jungkook's space, close enough that Jungkook could feel the warmth of him, the familiar steadiness. That's where you're wrong. I've been here, maybe not perfectly, maybe not bravely enough, but I stayed. Jungkook's hands trembled. Then why did it feel like betrayal out there? Because truth feels like betrayal when you've been lying to yourself, Jimin said. I didn't say his name to hurt you. I said it because I saw you drowning and pretending you were fine. Jungkook turned back, eyes glossy, anger finally cracking into something raw and exposed. You don't get to decide when I break. No, Jimin replied, voice breaking now too. But I get to refuse to watch you break alone. The room seemed to breathe with them, every sound amplified. The hum of the air conditioner, the distant footsteps in the hallway, the uneven rhythm of Jungkook's heart. He sank onto the couch suddenly, head dropping into his hands. I hated him for leaving, Jungkook confessed, voice muffled. And I hated myself more for missing him. I thought if I acknowledged that pain, it would mean everything I built after was fragile. Jimin knelt in front of him without hesitation. Pain doesn't erase strength, it proves it. Jungkook looked up slowly. What if the world twists this? He whispered. What if they turn it into rumors, into something ugly? Let them talk, Jimin said fiercely. They don't live in your chest, I do, we do. The words hung heavy, intimate, dangerously honest. Jungkook stared at him, searching for doubt, for fear. He found none. You're not scared, Jungkook asked. I am, Jimin admitted, but I'm more scared of losing you to silence. Something finally gave way. Jungkook pulled Jimin into a sudden, tight embrace, fingers gripping fabric like an anchor. He shook as the last of the adrenaline drained from his body. I don't want to be quiet anymore, he said, voice barely holding together. Then don't be, Jimin murmured, holding him just as tightly. Scream if you have to, cry, say his name, say anything, just don't disappear. They stayed like that for a long moment, the world outside waiting, unaware of the quiet war being laid to rest behind closed doors. When Jungkook finally pulled back, his eyes were clearer, his posture straighter, not healed, but no longer hiding. Next time, Jungkook said softly, warn me before you change my life on stage. Jimin gave a small, tired smile. Next time I'll stand closer. Jungkook nodded, a fragile but genuine smile forming through the remnants of tears. The stage had taken his silence, but backstage, he reclaimed his voice. Not as an idol, not as an image, but as a man choosing to be seen. The news broke before the dressing room door even opened. Jungkook felt it before he saw it, the vibration of phones buzzing nonstop, the shift in the air when staff avoided eye contact, the way silence suddenly meant something else entirely. Jimin's phone lit up in his hand, screen filled with headlines, clips already cut and sharpened into weapons. Jungkook crying on stage, after Jimin says mysterious name. Who is Hyun, the secret that shook the concert? Fans divided, after emotional breakdown goes viral. Jungkook let out a slow breath that felt like it scraped his lungs. That was fast. Jimin didn't look away from the screen. They were waiting for something like this. For weakness, Jungkook said flatly. For humanity, Jimin corrected, then looked up. But they don't know the difference. A manager knocked sharply and entered without waiting. His smile was tight, professional, forced. We need to talk, now. The room felt smaller with him in it. PR wants a statement, something vague, emotional but controlled. No names, no implications. Jungkook's jaw clenched, so we erase him again. The manager frowned. We protect the brand. Jimin stepped forward before Jungkook could stop himself from speaking. He is not a brand right now. He's a person who just cracked open in front of millions. And that's exactly the problem, the manager snapped. People will speculate. They already are. Some are saying it's staged. Others are saying it's a lover. Some are digging into old trainee records. Jungkook felt cold. Old records. Yes, the manager said carefully. The name Hyun appears in some pre-debut materials. Someone who left suddenly. There are rumors. Jimin's eyes widened. You told me he vanished quietly. He didn't, Jungkook said hoarsely. He disappeared because they told him to, because he was inconvenient. The room went silent. What do you mean inconvenient? Jimin asked. Jungkook hesitated, then laughed softly, bitterly. He got hurt, badly, during training. They said he was slowing the team down. They offered him a choice, leave quietly or be remembered as a failure. Jimin's voice trembled. And you never told anyone this. I was told not to, Jungkook replied. And I listened, because I was scared they'd take everything away from me too. The manager's expression hardened. This is exactly why we need to control the narrative. Jungkook stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly against the floor. No, this is exactly why I won't. The manager stared at him. Think carefully, one wrong word and... And what? Jungkook interrupted. You'll silence me like you silenced him. Jimin felt his chest tighten. This was no longer about tears on stage. This was about power, about truth buried so deep it had poisoned everything built on top of it. Jungkook, the manager said, lowering his voice. Do you want this to turn into a controversy that destroys your image? Jungkook looked at Jimin, really looked at him, saw the fear there, yes, but also pride, faith. My image already shattered, Jungkook said quietly, and I'm still standing. The manager exhaled sharply. Then don't expect protection. He left. The door slammed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the building felt louder than before. They're going to come for you, Jimin said. I know. And for him, Jimin added. Jungkook nodded. They already did. Jimin's voice broke. You loved him. Jungkook didn't deny it. In a way that taught me how to survive. In a way I was never allowed to name. Jimin stepped closer, tension crackling between them. And what about now? He asked, dangerously soft. What happens if they start asking why his name matters to you this much? Jungkook swallowed. Then I'll tell the truth. Jimin's breath caught. All of it. Enough, Jungkook said. Enough that he's no longer erased. Enough that I'm no longer hiding. Jimin laughed under his breath, a mix of fear and admiration. You're about to set fire to everything. Maybe it needs to burn, Jungkook replied. A producer burst in suddenly, eyes wide. There's something you need to see. He held up a tablet. A live stream was trending fast. A familiar face filled the screen, older, thinner, eyes carrying a weight Jungkook recognized instantly. Hyun. I didn't expect my name to be spoken again, Hyun said on the screen, voice steady but tight. But since it has been, I think it's time I stop being quiet too. Jungkook's legs nearly gave out. Jimin grabbed his arm. He's alive. Tears welled up again, but this time they burned with something different. Shock, relief, terror. Hyun continued. I left because I was told my pain was a liability. I stayed silent because someone I cared about was still inside that system. I didn't want to hurt him. Jungkook pressed a hand to his mouth. But watching him cry today, Hyun said, eyes shining, I realized silence hurt him more. The livestream cut abruptly. The room exploded into chaos outside. Voices shouting, phones ringing, footsteps running. Jungkook looked at Jimin, breath shaking. He spoke because of me. Because of you, Jimin echoed, awed. Jungkook straightened slowly. Fear still lived in his chest, but it no longer ruled him. Then I won't let him stand alone this time. Jimin's eyes burned with emotion. Whatever happens next, he said, voice fierce, we face it together. Jungkook nodded, heart pounding, not with dread, but with the terrifying, exhilarating certainty that the truth was no longer buried, and nothing would ever be quiet again. The building felt like it was holding its breath. Sirens wailed somewhere far below the studio, not for them but loud enough to bleed into Jungkook's pulse. The live stream had been cut, but its echo lingered in every corridor, every whisper, every vibrating phone in every pocket. Hyun's face, older, sharper, painfully real, was now everywhere. Jungkook stood frozen, staring at the blank screen as if it might flicker back to life and take everything back. He shouldn't have done that, a staff member muttered from the hallway. This is going to explode. It already has, Jimin said coldly. Another manager rushed in, face pale. Legal is freaking out. We need you both in the conference room. Now. Jungkook didn't move. Jungkook, the manager pressed, irritation creeping into his voice. This is bigger than your feelings. Jungkook finally turned, eyes dark, voice steady in a way that frightened even himself. No, this is exactly because of them. The conference room lights were too bright, too clean, like a place where emotions were meant to die quietly. Executives lined the table, faces stiff with calculation. Screens showed charts, trending tags, numbers climbing like a wildfire. Hyun exposed. Justice for Hyun. Jungkook deserves the truth. One executive cleared his throat. We will issue a statement distancing the company from any past trainee disputes. Jungkook laughed once, sharp and humorless. Disputes. Careful, another executive warned. You are under contract. So was he, Jungkook snapped, until you broke him. The room stiffened. Jimin leaned forward, hands flat on the table. You let him get injured. You labeled him a risk. Then you erased him. And now you're surprised people are angry. "This is not your place," an executive said. "It became my place the moment you made silence a condition for survival," Jimin replied. Jungkook's phone buzzed in his hand. A message, unknown number. "Hyun, I didn't mean to drag you into this." "Hyun, but I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Jungkook's throat closed. He typed back with shaking fingers. "Jungkook, I waited years to hear your voice again. Don't apologize." Another executive stood abruptly. "If you continue down this path, you risk everything. Endorsements, tour, your image." "My image," Jungkook echoed softly. "You mean the version of me that never cries, never questions, never remembers the people who bled beside me." Silence. Jungkook straightened, something unmistakable in his posture now. "I won't deny him. I won't deny myself. If you want a statement, here it is." He turned to Jimin, eyes burning. "Stand with me." Jimin didn't hesitate. "Always." They left the room before anyone could stop them. The press area was chaos. Cameras snapped violently as soon as they appeared, flashes exploding like gunfire. Questions were hurled without mercy. "Who is Hyun to you? Were you forced into silence? Is the company hiding abuse? Is this about love?" Jungkook stepped up to the microphone. The noise fell into a sharp, electric quiet. "My name was said on stage," Jungkook began, voice low but unshaking. "And I cried, not because I was weak, but because I remembered someone I was told to forget." Gasps rippled through the room. "Hyun was my teammate," Jungkook continued. "My friend, the person who held me up when I wanted to quit. He was injured, discarded, and erased, and I let it happen." "No," Jimin said quietly beside him. "You survived it." Jungkook glanced at him, then back to the cameras. "I stayed silent because I was afraid I'd lose everything. Tonight I realized I already lost something far more important." His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "I won't be quiet anymore." The room erupted. Executives shouted. Security moved. But it was too late. The truth had crossed the threshold. Backstage later, Jungkook collapsed onto a chair, body finally giving in to the tremor it had been holding back. Jimin crouched in front of him, gripping his knees. "You just changed everything," Jimin said softly. Jungkook let out a shaky laugh. "I know." "Are you okay?" Jungkook closed his eyes. "I'm terrified. I feel like I just jumped without knowing if there's ground." Jimin reached up, cupping his face. "There is, I'm here." Jungkook leaned into the touch, forehead resting against Jimin's palm. "He saw me cry." "He heard you speak," Jimin corrected. Another buzz, a message from Hyun again. "Hyun, I'm proud of you." "Hyun, no matter what happens next." Jungkook pressed the phone to his chest, tears spilling freely now, not hidden, not rushed. "They're going to try to tear us apart," Jungkook whispered. Jimin smiled, eyes fierce and wet. "Let them try." Outside, the world roared, angry, divided, awake. But inside that narrow space between them, Jungkook felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not safety. Truth. And for the first time, he knew he was ready to fight for it. The night did not end when the cameras turned off. It followed them like a shadow that refused to detach. Jungkook sat in the van, city lights streaking across the darkened window, phone clenched in his hand as if it were the only thing keeping him anchored to reality. Messages flooded in faster than he could read. Support, hate, theories sharpened into knives. His name trended beside words like betrayal, bravery, scandal, truth. Jimin watched him quietly from the opposite seat. "You don't have to read all of that," he said. "I do," Jungkook replied, voice rough. "If I don't look at it, it owns me." Jimin leaned forward. "And if you do?" Jungkook let out a humorless breath. "Then at least I know what I'm fighting." The van stopped abruptly. A manager turned around, face tight. "Change of plans. The company wants an internal meeting, tonight." Jimin scoffed. "Of course they do." The building they were taken to felt colder than the last, glass and steel swallowing warmth whole. In the waiting room, Jungkook's phone buzzed again. "Hyun, They're contacting me. Hyun, offering silence, money, an apology without accountability. Jungkook's fingers trembled as he typed. Jungkook, what did you say? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Hyun, I said I'm tired of being erased. Jungkook closed his eyes. For years, that exhaustion had lived inside him too. They were called in. The room was crowded, executives, lawyers, faces trained to stay neutral while deciding someone's fate. The air smelled faintly of coffee and control. An executive spoke first. This situation has escalated beyond expectation. Because you let it rot, Jimin said sharply. We are willing to acknowledge past mismanagement, another voice said, but only if this stops now. Jungkook looked up. Stops how? A joint statement, regret, closure, no further interviews, no names. No Hyun, Jungkook said. The executive didn't deny it. Jungkook stood slowly. You taught us to endure pain quietly. You never taught us what to do when silence becomes violence. A murmur rippled through the room. You owe your career to this company, someone snapped. Jungkook smiled faintly, sadly, and he lost his because of it. Jimin stepped in front of Jungkook slightly, protective, defiant. You can threaten contracts all you want. The public already knows, and Hyun isn't alone anymore. A lawyer leaned forward. If you continue, this will get personal. People will speculate about your relationships, about each other. Jimin didn't blink. Let them. Jungkook's breath caught, but he nodded. I won't sacrifice another truth to protect an image. Silence fell heavy and final. The meeting ended without resolution. No handshake, no comfort. Outside, rain had started, cold and relentless. Jungkook stood under the overhang, letting the sound soak into him. I don't know how to do this, he admitted quietly. I've always been good at enduring, not at confronting. Jimin stepped closer, rain misting his hair. You don't have to be good at it, you just have to be honest. Jungkook looked at him, eyes searching. Even if it costs us. Jimin answered without hesitation. Especially then. Jungkook's phone rang. Hyun's name flashed across the screen. He answered with shaking hands. Hey, Jungkook said. Hyun's voice came through, steady but emotional. I saw your statement. I saw everything. I should have protected you, Jungkook whispered. I'm sorry it took me this long. There was a pause, then a soft exhale. You were surviving, I don't blame you, but I won't be quiet anymore. Jungkook's eyes burned. Neither will I. When the call ended, Jungkook felt lighter and heavier all at once. He looked at Jimin, rain clinging to his lashes, expression open and unguarded. You could still walk away, Jungkook said. I wouldn't blame you. Jimin stepped even closer, voice low, intense. Don't insult me like that. Jungkook laughed weakly, then pulled Jimin into a tight embrace, rain soaking them both. I'm scared. I know, Jimin murmured. So am I. They stood there, holding each other while the storm fell harder, the world outside arguing, accusing, dissecting. Inside that moment, there was no stage, no company, no audience. Only 2 people choosing truth over comfort, and a past that had finally stopped screaming in silence. Morning arrived without mercy. Jungkook hadn't slept. The hotel room was dim, curtains barely holding back the gray dawn, the city humming like it hadn't just torn his life open overnight. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, phone glowing with notifications he no longer had the strength to ignore. Jungkook risks it all. Fans demand answers. Company accused of cover-up after former trainee speaks out. Is Jimin involved more than he admits? The last headline made his chest tighten. A knock sounded at the door, sharp, urgent. Jimin walked in seconds later without waiting for permission, hair still damp from the rain, eyes blazing with restrained fury. They leaked. Jungkook looked up slowly. What? Internal documents, Jimin said, throwing his phone onto the bed. Training injury reports, medical evaluations. Someone wanted to control the damage, but they exposed everything instead. Jungkook scrolled, hands shaking. Hyun's name was there. Dates. Notes written in cold, bureaucratic language. Unfit. Liability. Replaceable. They turned his pain into paperwork, Jungkook whispered. And now, Jimin added, voice dark, they're spinning it like you knew everything and stayed silent out of ambition. The words hit harder than any headline. That's not true. I know, Jimin said immediately, but truth doesn't trend as fast as blame. Jungkook stood abruptly, packing the room. They're going to destroy Hyun all over again. They'll say he's bitter, that he wants attention. And they'll say you're manipulating sympathy, Jimin replied. And they'll say I pushed you. Jungkook stopped. Did you? Jimin met his eyes without flinching. I pushed you to live. Silence stretched between them, tight and electric. Another knock. This time it was their manager, face drawn and sleepless. You need to see this. He handed over a tablet. A new video was circulating. Grainy, old, a rehearsal room. 2 younger figures practicing late into the night. Jungkook recognized himself instantly. And Hyun. Hyun's arm was wrapped in bandages. He stumbled slightly during a move. A voice off camera snapped. Stop slowing him down. The video cut there. Jungkook felt something inside him rupture completely. They filmed that, he breathed. They kept it. Jimin's voice shook with rage. They archived his suffering like content. The manager cleared his throat nervously. Public opinion is shifting fast, but so is pressure from the top. They want you to deny everything. Say you were unaware. Say Hyun left voluntarily. Jungkook laughed, a hollow sound that echoed too loudly. So they want me to lie better than before. Jungkook, the manager said carefully, this is your career. Jungkook turned, eyes burning. This is my conscience. Jimin stepped forward. He's not denying it. The manager hesitated. Then you need to be prepared for consequences. I am, Jungkook said, but are you prepared for the truth? The manager looked away. When they were alone again, Jungkook sank back onto the bed, hands covering his face. His shoulders shook, not with tears at first, but with something closer to fury. They broke him, Jungkook said hoarsely, and I let them scare me into silence. Jimin knelt in front of him, gripping his wrists, forcing him to look up. You were 19. They were powerful. Don't let them rewrite that into guilt that eats you alive. Jungkook's voice cracked. Then help me do this right. Jimin didn't hesitate. Then we stop reacting, we speak. A few hours later, the studio lights were back on, but this time there was no script. Jungkook sat across from the interviewer, hands folded, heart pounding louder than the countdown. Jimin sat beside him, unflinching. The first question came sharp. Did you know Hyun was injured and forced out? Yes, Jungkook answered. The room stiffened. Why didn't you speak up then? Because I was afraid, Jungkook said, voice steady despite the storm inside him. And because I was taught that silence was loyalty. Do you regret it? Every memory surged at once. The practice room, the bandages, the goodbye that never came. Yes, Jungkook said, every day. The interviewer pressed harder. Some say your emotions on stage were performative. Jungkook smiled sadly. If you think pain that deep can be performed, then you've never loved anyone enough to lose them while they're still alive. A sharp inhale from behind the cameras. And Jimin, the interviewer asked, what role did he play? Jungkook turned toward him instinctively. He refused to let me disappear. Jimin spoke then, voice calm but unyielding. I didn't expose anything. The truth did that on its own. The interview ended in stunned silence. When they stepped outside, the air felt different, heavier, clearer. Jungkook's phone buzzed one more time. Hyun, I saw it. Hyun, for the first time, I feel like my pain mattered. Jungkook closed his eyes, tears finally falling freely. It did, he whispered. Jimin stood beside him, close enough to steady him, far enough to let him stand on his own. The storm wasn't over. Lawsuits loomed. Reputations trembled. The industry was watching, waiting to see who would break first. But Jungkook wasn't quiet anymore. And this time, when the world pushed back, he pushed forward, with his voice shaking, his heart exposed, and the truth burning too brightly to be buried again. The backlash came like a wave, loud and merciless, but it did not drown them. Days turned into weeks, and the world kept arguing, commentators shouting over each other, fans fighting in comment sections, executives issuing statements that said everything and nothing at once. Lawsuits were filed quietly. Contracts were renegotiated behind closed doors. Some doors closed forever. Jungkook watched it all from a distance. He had never allowed himself before. One evening, long after the noise began to settle into a dull roar, he sat alone in an empty practice room. The mirrors were dark, lights low, the familiar scent of wood and dust grounding him. This room had once been a battlefield, then a refuge, then a cage. Now it was just a room again. The door opened softly. Jimin stepped in, carrying 2 bottles of water, his presence as natural as breathing. He handed one to Jungkook without speaking and sat beside him on the floor, backs against the mirror. "You did it," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook let out a small laugh. "I survived it." "That too." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't demand anything. Jungkook stared at his reflection, still tired, still famous, still flawed, but no longer hollow. "I used to think strength meant enduring everything without flinching," Jungkook said. "Now I think it means choosing what you refuse to endure anymore." Jimin nodded. "That's called growing up." Jungkook turned to him. "You never asked me to be brave. You just stayed." Jimin met his gaze, eyes warm. "Because you were worth staying for, even when you didn't believe it." Another message buzzed on Jungkook's phone. Hyun again. "Hyun, I'm starting physical therapy next week." "Hyun, for myself this time." "Hyun, thank you for saying my name." Jungkook smiled through quiet tears. He typed back slowly, deliberately. "Jungkook, I'll never be quiet about you again." "Jungkook, live well, that's all I ever wanted." He put the phone down and leaned his head back against the mirror, closing his eyes. The ache in his chest was still there, but it no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a scar, proof of survival. The next concert came weeks later. The stage lights rose, the crowd roared, and Jungkook walked forward without hesitation. When he sang, his voice carried everything he had once buried: loss, love, fear, forgiveness. It wasn't perfect. It was real. At one point, he glanced to the side of the stage. Jimin was there, watching him the way he always had, not as an idol, not as an image, but as a person who had chosen truth even when it hurt. Jungkook smiled. This time, there were no tears of collapse, only tears of release. The world would keep spinning. Stories would be rewritten. Some people would never understand. But Jungkook had learned something that no headline could take away. Silence had once kept him alive. Truth had finally taught him how to live.